Happy Monday. Let's see, it looks like my mic is kind of loud, which might be good. um, so it looks like we're still in an ad break, which no big deal. I don't really think anybody's here other than a couple people, which, I'm not going to complain about for a Monday. It means I can say whatever I want. I'm kidding. Let's see. Oh, awesome. Thanks, Druid. Is it sounding better for you, though? I'm wondering. I made a couple of little adjustments when Jill and I were streaming, and I made a couple little adjustments to my mic, and I'm wondering if I fixed the issue with you having loud music and then me being a lot less loud. Still too low? Okay. Well, with sound stuff, it is so weird. Anyway, it's like, it's fine through Zoom, but the minute I route it through, as soon as I route it through the software, it does weird stuff. So anyway, we're online. Anything can happen. So I hope you guys had a good weekend. My weekend was busy. I got a good sleep in. I think, I'm one of those people that need, I gotta have my 8 hours to be, not worthless. And I'll go for a few days only getting, 6 or 7 hours, and then I have to do a big sleep to kind of catch up. And so last week was kind of like that. And so I guess it was Friday night. I'm trying to think. Or was it it was Saturday night into Sunday. I had the big sleep. And I woke up and I was like, oh my God, I slept for 10 or 11 hours. It was crazy. Anyway, when you need it, right? Sleep's important. So anyway, I also had some other stuff, some, non-quilt related priorities, which really stink. I prioritize quilts, fabric, sewing, etc., all adjacent things, whenever I can, but sometimes other things sneak in there. So I had stuff to do, but in between, I did some research, you guys, and I got a ton of research done, comparatively, on this quilt behind me. And then another quilt, which I'll tell you a little bit of story about. We also have, a guest today who was unscheduled and is going to be leaving the studio because he is destructive and gets into things. So go on, friend. His new thing is coming in here, and I put these walls up for a couple of reasons. One is to kind of baffle the sound so that my sound is better. The other thing is to kind of keep the cats out, but they now love to sneak under my stands, which it's about this much room, which is easy for a cat to get under. Anyway, they have more recently decided that the barriers mean nothing to them. They're going to come anytime they feel like it. So anyway, let's see. As far as announcements, I don't think there's anything major to announce other than if you follow along with Quilt Nerding on Tuesday nights, we are starting Patchwork Pillowcases, which is a really, really interesting book. If you are interested in participating but you haven't gotten the book yet, we can give you the link to get it directly from the author, Anne Hermes. She's our friend. And even if you're not interested in really following along with the book, still stop by if you're free. We stream Quilt Nerding streams on YouTube, and you may have caught one of our co-streams recently. We're working on how that stuff works out and how the co-streaming works and stuff. But yeah, stop by if you're free because there's hijinks. This week is also a needlework nights week. We do needlework stuff on Wednesdays every other week. And so this Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern on YouTube, Quilt Nerding's channel, we're going to be doing advertising thimbles. So we've done a lot of advertising needlework items, and it was my turn to pick, and I was like, man, I have so many thimbles. Let's look at the advertising thimbles because they're kind of interesting. So that's what we're doing on Wednesday, and after this I need to photograph some thimbles. And I realized when you're photographing something that's that big and it has words wrapped around it, wow, that's not easy to photograph. Which is why I procrastinated on that this weekend. So yeah, I think that's the big stuff. AQSG seminars coming up soon, and we'll be kind of changing the schedule around a little bit. That'll be in a month, but yeah, it is coming fast. I don't know where this year has gone. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir. You guys know how this is. So yeah, stay tuned for info about that. I guess I'll just jump right in. Like I said, I don't think there's a whole lot of major announcements. So I was going to start a new book today, and I looked at two options. I kind of want to go back to some Ruth Finley. Now, she wrote a book about Godey's, which was the very first ladies' fashion magazine out of Paris. I guess it was out of Paris. No, maybe not. No, I'm wrong. There is a whole history with the lady who started Godey's. Her name is Sarah. I don't have the book in front of me. In any event, I once read some stuff out of it for this stream. And it's she's an interesting lady. So yeah, let's see. Dragging this out of my memory. She was tapped as like the lady editor. And I think it was the first fashion magazine that like kind of employed the French fashions, but was here in the US. I think I have those facts right. In any event, we're going to start reading that book soon, but I don't think we'll have time to get started today because I have some action-packed things. But yeah, I think that's what we're going to do next. And then after that, I was kind of thinking about Carrie Hall, but not her quilt book. Because Carrie Hall also wrote a book kind of about Godey's, but it's called From Hoop Skirts to Nudity. So I think it kind of starts off with Godey's and kind of goes along with fashion. It's fashion stuff. So I thought this would be interesting, kind of take a break from some of the quilt stuff that we've been reading, but also, they're adjacent. They're quilt adjacent because they're quilt authors. So I also was doing a little bit of research for my AQSG study center for seminar, and I kind of ran across some papers and some posts that I had never seen before on the Quilt Index, and which the Quilt Index, I know I've mentioned it. I think I probably showed you guys screenshots from it or showed it on screen, and Jill's mentioned it. But it's a really great resource. You have to navigate it, not like a search engine, because just typing in will get you stuff, but maybe not what you want. You actually have to navigate it like a repository that you do when you're researching. And that's something that the Material Culture series that AQSG is doing might start to touch on some of those things. So I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on that before they touch on it, but it's something that I think is really interesting and helpful for people. It was things that I didn't really know until I actually took some classes on it. And interestingly, the classes I took were actually in genealogy. And they showed how you navigate these public repositories, public information repositories, and even some private stuff. And it's just not, it's not to say that it's counterintuitive or anything. It's just, if you've never done it and then you're used to Google, it feels like, oh, this is a little bit harder than just typing in like, hey computer, find me whatever. So anyway, I wanted to touch on that, and it might be a while before I actually show that process. However, it's really useful to know, and it's helpful when you're looking for things. So I'll get to that in a minute. The first thing I wanted to start with, though, is to talk about a quilt that you have seen before behind me. I took it down a while ago, so let me hide that and jump to my other screen. Okay. So this is the quilt. I had it hanging behind me for a while recently. So this hopefully looks familiar, kind of familiar. It's not a very big quilt. It's like a throw size or a baby quilt size. It's square. Um, and I can't remember what I was talking about. It's probably been week before last. I just threw out there something about a log cabin quilt behind me, and I pointed at it. And I'm like, later on, in fact, somebody mentioned it to me. I'm like, that's not a log cabin quilt. That's a string quilt. So what this is a string quilt. It's worked on a foundation. And so each of these little blocks, of course, they're the pieces of fabric are little strips, and they're foundation stitched across the little block, and then the little blocks are put together. So then they make these, this secondary pattern of darker blocks, which is, it's interesting because this was not. So as far as string piecing, and it's often kind of like a sort of scraps utilitarian type of thing. You're like, the strings are literally like your extra little pieces. You're kind of pulling them out, put them together. But this person really took, the maker, they really took the time to piece each one of these from dark to light so that they knew when they put this together it was going to look like this. So they had to, I think it's really brilliant planning, right? It's very easy to say like, oh, this thing was just thrown together with a bunch of scraps. And it was, but it's also, well, it was thrown together with some pieces. We can't be sure necessarily that they were scraps, but I suspect they were. But what really attracted me to this quilt, I bought it for like $50 in a little antique store in California. What drew me to it were these pink pieces. And so this is the back. We'll come back to the back. It's kind of hard to photograph, but I'll show you in more detail what this looks like. But these bright hot pink strips are what drew me to it. I saw it sitting in a booth. I went over, I picked it up, and I was like, oh, these are so pretty. I kept looking at it and kind of feeling it, and I was like, well, it appears to all be silks. And I haven't done any fiber tests. Fiber burn tests are one good way of determining what kind of fibers you're dealing with. There's stuff going on here in terms of condition. This is just what happens with these silk things. They start to shred, or they crack and flake, or shatter. That's called shattering. And it's the adulterants and the dyes and the mordants for the dyes, all the things that go into silk in these certain time period, that just make it like that, like it deteriorates. And there are also a lot of silks in here, or silky fabrics, that are in very good condition. So off the bat, I've kind of looked at this, and that bright pink is so vivid. And so I kind of thought, well, one of the biggest enemies of any kind of fabrics is light. So this has not been in the light. There's no fading, really. Now heat can be very problematic for fibers, especially like this. And then there's just age. So, big question marks around how old this is. I suspect the top is probably turn of the century. Is just a good guess. I could be totally wrong. Some of these silks, they don't have a real specific look to them. They just kind of are. And you've got stuff like plaids in here. A silk plaid, like, gosh, that can go to the mid 1800s, but I kind of doubt that's what we're looking at here. But what I was going to say about sort of doing a fiber test is, if this is much later than I think it is, and maybe that there are some things in here that are like acetate or nylon, or I don't know that rayon would necessarily result in this very fine silky feeling. Rayon tends to be Rayon can be like a silk substitute, but it's definitely got like a very different feel to it than silk. So I don't think any of this is rayon, but I kind of wondered about like nylon and acetate. Like I think those kind of be made, they're early synthetics that can kind of be made like a silk. So I don't know. It's a question, and I paid $50 for this, so I'm not super concerned about like something terrible happening. If I like pull some of these damaged threads out and test them. So I mean, obviously this one, that's silk. that's straggly, broken silk. But some of these other ones that I can kind of get in there and maybe like pull a thread, I will do some fiber tests. Now to rewind, I took this little quilt with me to the Eastern Shore quilt study group that I went to last week. And, I kind of threw it out on the table and I was like, this is kind of interesting. Like, look at the back of it and, and then look at the front of it. And, I don't know what I'm looking at here. Again, I have this estimate of what I think that the time period is, kind of fits. It's got this ruffle. People tend to hate ruffles on quilts, or, well, they love them or they hate them, and most people hate them. But this one has this wide, and it's a ribbon because it's not finished on the edge. It's like that, it's the selvage edge, but it's a ribbon. It's not like yardage. So all that. And the ladies, as they were looking at it, they said, have you really examined this? And I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, and I hadn't given much thought to this. The quilting on the back does not go through to the front. So they suggested, get out a seam ripper. Which on an old quilt you're like, gasp. But with this one, it was actually kind of an easier thing to do. It's not going to really damage or destroy the quilt. I just was able to clip some stitches to kind of just peel back the edge and see what's going on here. And I think two people that they're quilt knowledge gurus basically said, you probably have a quilt on a quilt. Like, this silky string stuff was stitched on top of another quilt that possibly had this quilting. And I was like, that seems like a possibility. So let's get there in a second. Let me show you more pictures. That pink, it's everywhere in the quilt, and it's beautiful. And like I said, here's some more of that damage. It's like just certain sections are, and it's unfortunate, but it is the way it is. It's just how these quilts are. But look at those delicious colors. I mean, just so pretty. Just make your mouth water. I love them. And some of this is like almost a brocade. And then, these are kind of, woven, but then there's also kind of prints. This one I loved. Look, there's this little, I don't think they really fussy cut anything, but this is a little bow, that whatever that fabric was. This one, when I saw it, I was like, oh, that looks like woven, like a belt or backpack strap. It looks like woven nylon, but it's not. It is printed. And, when you touch it, it's like very smooth and silky. So I was like, oh, wow, interesting. The fabric here is gone. So what this is that foundation. It's the backing. And I'll show you more in a second, but they used all kinds of different little bits for the foundation. And those would have been like the true scraps, the household, linens that they probably cut up. So now these are pictures where I've shown the damage. And so this here, I'm kind of pulling back a little bit of shattered silk, and you can see this is like a blue colored fabric in there, kind of like a cornflower blue. This one, it looks like this red piece formed the entire corner, and then they stitched on this lavender, and then they stitched on this black, which is deteriorated. So it's like there's multi-layers here of fabric. This one is another, using that green plaid foundation. It's very rough. I don't know that it would necessarily qualify as homespun, because I think homespun has like a very distinct look about it, but it's definitely like a household linen type of fabric. I don't know what else you would have use that for other than some type of household linen. Here's some more. This fabric I think is kind of all the same fabric. This one, a little bit hard to see. I don't know if no, I didn't include another one. This is almost like an eyelet shirting kind of fabric under there, and that one's really interesting. And I can see multiple places where that shows up also. So, you know, that kind of is the question, like, you know, if the silks are hard to date, well, then what's the deal with those foundation fabrics, and can you date those? And so to me, this particular fabric seems kind of newer. Again, I don't know though, because I mean, fashion fabrics are fashion fabrics. And sometimes I feel like, you know, I'm kind of at the beginning of my journey with being able to properly date fabrics. And I feel like I make more mistakes than I get right. But, and I'm often surprised by what I think has got to be a more recent fabric, but then I'll find out that it truly, you know, is documented as being much older. So I don't know if that's what this is, this little fabric under there. So now the back. Hopefully you can see these pretty decently. This one I think was probably the one that didn't photograph very well, but in the corners it has this, I don't know, it's like a kerpow. It reminds me of, like, you know, an explosion or something, you know, like a bam, a pow in a comic book. Not something that I personally see on a lot of old quilts. It seems very modern. There's this nice big chunky cable, a four cable, a quadruple cable, I don't know what they call it, but it's 4 lines to make the cable. And then you got this zigzag, which also, you know, I don't know, I don't see that very often in quilting unless you've got like a streak of lightning kind of thing going on with the piecing. And then in the center, you have your standard crosshatch. But then in the very middle, there's another one of these, you know, kerpow kind of things. And then it's got some little elements in there. And then there's these kind of almost scribbly looking kind of, I don't know if they were supposed to be flowers or feathers. I'm not exactly sure what they were going for there. But nonetheless, the back of this is just interesting. The fabric is like, I think it's a cotton sateen, because it's got a sheen to it, and the weave is like a satin weave. Now, as far as these different types of weaves, if you think of like a regular quilting cotton has got an even weave. It's got, you know, all of your threads that make the warp, and then the weft is the part that goes perpendicular, and it's just a straight over and under every single warp thread. A twill weave goes like over 2, under 2, over 2, under 2, and then it like shifts a little bit. So it'd be like over 1, under 2, over 2, over 1, under 2, over 2, under 2, like that, so that it's the same amount of over unders, but they're shifted. And if you look at like denim, blue jeans, you can see those little dashes. They're kind of long, and they're sort of stacked on each other, sort of like bricks, kind of. So that's a twill weave. Satin weave is like twill on steroids. So it goes over and under like kind of longer jumps, and because it's like it's usually done with with silk, like silk satin, or you know, even today it's a polyester or whatever, but it's a very silky thread, or polished cotton. It gets like that. Polished cotton's wrong. No. Cotton sateen would be the weave. Polished cotton, I think, has a glaze on it, if I'm correct. So anyway, that's my very bad explanation of these fabrics. But again, in looking at it, this appears to be like a cotton sateen on the back, not silk. But again, I will test it. I will pull a thread and test it. It like almost doesn't match the front. So this weekend, I mentioned to somebody, I think I was actually talking to Jill, and I'd said, you know, this is what the ladies told me to do. And I was like, I'm gonna take a break and do it. So you need to see, I just clipped the edge here, And this ribbon, the silk ribbon ruffle, is been tacked down with or been stitched down with a black thread. So it was pretty easy. I just picked the stitches off of that and pulled it open. Now look at this. The ladies said there's probably some kind of quilt in there. They wouldn't have quilted just on the batting to backing. They wouldn't have done that. Guess what? They did. Now the batting is under this white stuff. This white stuff is almost like a cheesecloth. And my guess is this is a scrim. And I think I mentioned this on a stream at some point recently. A scrim is like some type of like stabilizing fabric. So if you think about making cotton batting, which I have been doing, I have literally been making cotton batting from my own cotton bowls. You've just got think about it. If you just grabbed a bunch of cotton balls and flattened them out, they don't really hold together the way batting does today. So they would use some type of scrim to sort of hold the batting together. This appears to be an older one, I'm guessing. A lot of this is guesswork. I have to further this research. But I'm guessing that this scrim was there to hold this together. Today, or within the past few decades, batting with the scrim is often it's a polyester or some type of synthetic scrim. And it may not be as quite as obvious as what this cheeseclothy kind of stuff is. So, but what I'm showing here is where the fabric or where the front is tacked to the back. So this is that foundation fabric that the strings are sewn to. And you can literally see the person who did this, it's all hand pieced, all hand stitched, and then they did a whip stitch along the raw edges of these foundation pieces. And my guess is because the silk itself was probably fraying, and so they just whipped it to kind of hold it all together. And then you could see this thread here. That is actually a thread that has tacked the front to the back. But what's crazy, and the other place I showed this, I did it with a video, and I think I forgot to put it from my phone to my computer, so I may not be able to show that. But somehow this person very carefully did these tacking stitches without going through to the back. That's the part that blows my mind, and I need to look at that more. But I was like, somehow or another, this person did this quilting, scrimmed batting to this backing, did all this quilting, then tacked this front to it, and did this tacking without it going all the way through. Now in this case, we're just talking, it's like a single tacking stitch. But I also ran up against the corner here where it's literally tacked with a running stitch, and this running stitch only goes through a portion, the middle parts. It does not go through the front and the back. And so I'm I can't quite wrap my head around what they did. I have to look at it more and really think through it. But I really think this person, the maker, they just were very exacting, with some of these stitches, and got this thing to go together. So yeah, this was an interesting little foray. Now, ultimately, my guess, I think this is the last slide, yes, I'll go back here. My guess is that the front is older than the back. I could be totally wrong about all this. And I think, with so many of these quilts we find, when we have no idea who made them, no idea where they came from, no real idea of what their time frame is. But I just really get the feeling, now, not to say that this was put together last week. I think it could be a mid-century thing. The front was turn of the century, 1920s even. The back of it was maybe I don't know, the 50s or 60s. I don't know. I'm just throwing things out there. But that's what I think is happening here. And so, again, it's just an interesting thing to think about and to consider that when things don't make sense It could be because you're looking at two very separate time periods. There's many, many, many times we've seen, and people have the provenance to prove it, where, grandma had this sack of half-finished quilt blocks, and she's been saving them since her grandmother made them. But, it's 1950, and she wants to get back into quilting, so she puts all this stuff together. Like, you have stories like that where these things happen. And I don't think it's like a major stretch to think that this backing was much, much later. And also because of this sateen that's on the backing, it is very, very, very pristine. It just feels like if it was contemporary to the front, it maybe would have had some more age-related kind of wear to it. But it really does, it's in very good condition, So that's my little study on this one. This was mostly just taking pictures, mostly like, again, snip, snip, peel apart and look to see what's going on inside. And then, right now it's sitting in my little quilt staging area. I want to get it stitched back together. I don't want to leave it open, right? So, hey, Mud Art. So glad to see you. So yeah, that's what's going on with this quilt. And, this is one of those things where if you end up with a quilt that, I would never tell somebody to take scissors or a seam ripper to like a very old or valuable, sentimental, whatever. But for something that, you're curious about, and if you think that, you can very carefully pick out some stitches without harming anything, especially if it's like picking them out on the back or around the edge, it's an interesting thing to study. Like, do it. Find out what's inside there. Just know that if you are not good at stitching it back together, you kind of leave a problem area. But in particular, this one for me was kind of low stakes because I didn't pay an extreme amount of money for this. And I know I can stitch it back together without any big deal. So that was the satin string quilt. Now, let us go to get out of here. And let's go to American Glory. American Glory is something else. So, presenter view. All right. So, this is American Glory. Behind me, you also see American Glory. Now, when I saw this, I recently bought it in an auction. I will be absolutely transparent. I paid a lot of money for this according to my budget. This cost $325. And then I had, buyer's premium, shipping, all that stuff. So this was not a cheap purchase. This ate into my budget. But I really, really wanted this quilt for a couple reasons. One, my obsession with eagle quilts. Number two, my obsession with kit quilts. So I felt like this was a good investment, and I'm very happy with it. Yeah, I did get it already. I've had it now for, when did I get it? I want to say it was last Wednesday or Thursday. Dana doesn't mess around with shipping. I gotta tell you that. I have bought things from out-of-state auction houses before, and sometimes they kind of give you this attitude like, oh, well, if you're we'll do in-house shipping for you, but it's gonna be like on our time. And, because it's like they kind of have the attitude of, well, people are gonna come pick things up, and then we'll get around to your shipping. After the locals pick theirs up. But Dana's like on it. Her team is getting the stuff shipped out. And I guess it's because, especially with these quilt auctions, probably most of her customers, the people who bid and buy, are not local to where she is. So, I'm assuming she has some, but for the most part, she's shipping stuff out. So anyway, she ships lickety split and she's in New Jersey. So, New Jersey to Maryland was not too long. So that's the beautiful thing. I did not have to wait forever for this purchase. I did go back. She sold one of these also in 2022 for $350. So I did get a $25 better than a couple years ago. Now, as I started researching this, I found lots of versions of it. Oh, thank you, Mod Art. I love it. And as I tell you more about it, hopefully you'll love it even more. So I kept finding pictures of it. And I have found the gamut of prices on this. I found a couple of auctions where this quilt, and it's a Paragon kit, where this Paragon quilt has sold for, around what I bought it for, right? Dana had this dated 1970s. I'm going to give you the real history in a minute. This one probably is 1970s. There's one I think it's the College of the Ozarks bookstore. They have two of them. They have the provenance. They know who the maker is. And they are selling, I think, for each one, this absolutely knocked me on the floor, $3,000. Now, it's not, we're going to get to why it's not this one. It's the other one. I should just keep going. One of the hallmarks of this, the one I have, is that we're working with a brown fabric. Okay? So, brown fabric. And I think I have a picture in here. Yes. So you can see it up close. And I put some filters on these, so they're probably a little bit blurry, but you can see it's like this very cute little, they're pink, orange, yellow, white little daisies. Very cute from a distance. You can't really even see them anyway. They read as kind of just a small print background kind of fabric. This red is like a really bright saturated red, and it is a great facsimile of turkey red. So when you hear people talk about turkey red in quilts, old antique quilts, it's a very color fast red. It was a technology that was developed in the Middle East, hence turkey. And it gave this like really bright, beautiful, solid color fast red. The other reds, madder, which is from the madder plant, that's more of like a burgundy brick red color, and it's not as vibrant. It can kind of like fade out. And then you have the synthetic reds that we know today, which can, just run the gamut. They can be a pinky red, they can be a cool red, they can be a warm red, whatever. So, but this one's like a really good facsimile of the turkey red. And then the other aspect of this is this yellow, which is definitely, absolutely 100%, either a reproduction or a 100-year print. Now, there's to differentiate between those, and this is something I'm still struggling with. I sort of need to just pick the brain of one of my guru friends, because I get confused over this. So there are reproduction prints, and today's fabrics, this makes total sense to you. You walk into a quilt store, they have the Civil War reproductions in one section usually, and you know that, Moda has made a line of, these prints. They've probably referenced an old quilt, or the designer has like a collection of fabric that they've referenced or whatever. And so those are your standard reproductions. But they were also doing reproductions in the 70s and 80s. It was, they were doing that. However, there's also this idea of the 100-year print. And these are the mills or fabric manufacturing companies that they started their business in the 1800s and were still in business in the latter half of the 20th century. Two of them that I have found, one is Cranston, and I've thrown Cranston out there a lot, and I think I have schooled myself this weekend on some things I was incorrect about. But Cranston, they started in the 1800s. They were up in, I think they were in Massachusetts or New Hampshire. I think New Hampshire. But they were open for over 100 and some years. The other one is Ellie Walker or Eli Walker. It's ELY, so I'm not sure if that's pronounced Eli or Ellie, but they are still in business in some capacity. We'll get to that in a minute. But they were also one of these companies that started in the 1800s and was producing fabric all the way through the 20th century. So what you would call a 100-year print is a print that the company never stopped making. Now, I guess, maybe it's something that they're not producing every single day, but that over the decades, they produced it and sold it. So that's one of the things that I need to clarify in my mind is what's a reproduction? What's a 100-year print? I'm very well could be wrong. I'm going to throw this out there. I think this is a 100-year print, and I will tell you why in a little bit. So, now this link, let me grab it. The person who wrote what is at this website, bear with me a minute. Gotta find my screen. This person was very specific about do not share. Whoops. Crud. I don't know if I'm going to be able to click this. Yeah, it's not letting me. Oh, there we go. So let me grab that. I'm going to hide that again. They were very specific about under no circumstances may my information be shown online. So I want to share that link with you. Really good info. And I clarified with somebody that she is indeed a knowledgeable person who wrote this. The things that she has quoted and said in this article, also very, what's the word I'm looking for? Reliable. So I'll let you look at that on your own. But what is in there is not just this quilt here, but the other eagle quilt that I am absurdly obsessed with. I have the kit. I do not have the finished quilt, which I have been chasing it for a while. I keep getting outbid on it in auctions, and I will get one day. But anyway, she talks about both of those in this site. Couple things came out of reading her piece, and they were very interesting. I was like, well, it isn't that interesting. So I moved on to looking, and Questa Benberry, the amazing Questa Benberry, who left us way too soon, she was one of the major big-time quilt researchers. Hey, Robin! Yay! I love talking to you guys while you sew and do chores. Because I know it's good to have something in your ear while you're doing odious things like household work. So Questa, again, one of the really big major quilt researchers of the 70s, 80s, and so on. She passed away, I think it was in 2007. But she looked at all kinds of different topics that are fascinating to me. Hey, Kate! You're going to be interested when I talk about fabric. I've schooled myself, and you're going to learn from that. Because I know you and I have talked to Cranston. So, she had a kit quilt collection, or a quilt kit collection. So, a kit quilt is made out of a kit. A quilt kit is the kit to make the quilt. But she had this huge collection of all of the different names, like Paragon and Jack Dempsey, or no, not Jack Dempsey. Those were patterns. It's all in the quilt index. But was it Aunt Martha, maybe? Busilla, Progress. There's a whole bunch of them. And all of this stuff is at MSU, Michigan State University. And they have, what you see here is just a couple of the pictures that I snagged. They have scanned all of this stuff in, which is amazing, because if you're researching quilt kits. Oh my gosh, you've got everything Questa Benberry collected. So, and I also love the fact that, I guess I could be showing this, presenting this. Go away, full screen, yes. You can see down here, it still has her, her return address, her mailing label for her is on there. And if you're not aware of this habit of people in the quilting communities, if you lend out a book or you lend out materials, people always stick their return addresses in the books and stuff. It's a great idea. But it was cute that I saw she had it also on these kits. So my guess is, I mean, she, from what I've heard, she was a very generous lady. So my guess is she probably did lend these things out to people to look at. So anyway, you can see kind of what this looks like. The pictures are a little bit difficult, but you see this is the background, and it's been printed with the design. So, you know, it's like this. And then you would have the pieces. They're also printed. So all you have to do is cut them out, and you figure out where they go because everything's numbered. It's like paint by numbers, basically. And you would cut all that out and find where it goes on the backing, which should also have that information printed on it. And then this right here is the binding. Now, one thing you should notice is the fact that this green is not this brown. So I was like, huh. And especially after I found out something I have not yet shared, I was like, well, this is so odd. Why would they have that brown fabric? And so this was a question I threw out to one of my lovable gurus, who I absolutely love. And she said, well, so I asked the question, could it be that Paragon, you know, they ran out of the green, they put in this brown, or mistake at the factory, right? And so my friend said, well, you know, maybe this maker made the kit and then decided she wanted to make another one, and this is just what she chose. Okay, that's a possibility. But I kept wondering, like, why just this brown? Like, the others look exactly like what's in the kit. Well, then, last night, oh, whoops, I'll come back to this. I run into the Henry Ford Museum. Now, Henry Ford has got lots of great stuff, and their collection is something that I have yet to actually go and spend any time just looking online. So, if you want to fall down a rabbit hole, go. It looks like they just have tons of stuff, and the fabulous thing about so many of these museums now is they're putting their collections online. So you can search and find at least small pictures of stuff, even, you know, if it may not be a great big, like, high resolution, the whole screen kind of thing, but you can still get these, like, thumbnails. Well, they have this American Glory, quilt kit, yeah, circa 1973. Dana had 1970s on the auction, and lo and behold, look at you guys, that's my fabric right here. So it was not a case of a mistake. It was not a case of the maker going, oh, well, I think I'm going to do my own thing. This was Paragon definitely did this. So now let me go back a little bit here and show you more of what Questa had. And that's this, which I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. This is a counter display. And so I'm guessing, again, like, if you're a store and these kits were sold in places like Lee Ward, which is not, that's a store I never went to. I don't think we had them on the East Coast, or at least not like Southeast where I grew up. But it sounds like, I think it's like a Midwest or maybe California thing, like West Coast. But anyway, Lee Ward is one of these stores. I'm thinking Ben Franklin is kind of like a similar type of place. Today we have Joann and Michael's and Hobby Lobby. So I think, like, Okay, Lee Ward's, yeah. So I think Lee Ward's, Ben Franklin, like those were kind of the older versions, and in some cases, at least Ben Franklin was kind of like a combination, like five and dime and craft and stuff. So had all these different kinds of stores back then. We don't have them now, but as an example, I would say that a company like Lee Ward, a store like Lee Ward, would get their selection of, you know, these kits. The buyers would probably say, yeah, we want like, I don't know, 5 of those for every store, or however they did it. And they would get this, or they would have to, I don't know, maybe they had to do it themselves. I don't know how they did this. But there was this countertop display thing, and it has the center made up, but I think it's a miniature version. I don't think what we're looking at here on my screen is as big as this, for sure, because like the kits are probably about yay big, and this is not much bigger than like that. You know, it's probably a little bit bigger than like an 8.5 by 11, but not much bigger. You know, and so, you know, I think scale wise, this has got to be smaller. Again, I am often proven wrong, but just from my perspective, that's what this looks like. Now, what you see here on the right from Questa's notes, this piece was flipped onto the back of this countertop display, but it is I'm guessing like a photocopy of the original quilt. And the original quilt is in the Philadelphia Museum of Art. Did I find it? Yes, I did. So this is what this pattern is based on, is this original quilt from the Philadelphia Museum. And you can see it's like they did a really, really faithful reproduction of this. There's a few things that are different. You have like the addition of these heart elements that are not in the original. This piece here is actually flipped upside down. In the original, that you probably can't see very well because of my screen. Let's see if I can lift it. I can see this piece right here. It kind of folds over the back of my screen. But that is, as you can see, the underneath the eagle in the original. And then, of course, the border, I think, is identical, with the exception of this reproduction, this Paragon reproduction, doesn't have the cutouts. And the cutouts are for a 4-poster bed. So, yeah. Very cool, right? This is a really great reproduction. And by the way, these counter stands, she had multiple ones for other kits. So there's another kit that's similar. It's probably similar time period to this particular one. That she also had a counter stand for. So I don't know, maybe it was like a particular store that made these counter stands that she got them from. I probably need to read her notes in here, and it's very tiny writing, so I just, yeah. Oh, it actually says in here where she obtained this from. It says store sample obtained from, I'm not sure. I'm gonna have to, let's see if I can grab this. Do I still have it open? There's nothing like researching on the fly, you guys. So let me see. Here we go. Let's see. Store sample obtained from, say, Scruggs, Vander something, and Barney. Let me zoom in. I need Robin's eagle eyes. Store sample obtained from Scruggs, Vander. It's Vander something. Vanderwood maybe, Vander something, and Barney, St. Louis, Missouri. Okay, so I'll have to go back and see, did she get the other tabletop or countertopper thing from the same place? Then that would tell me this store did their own thing. This wasn't something that like Paragon said, here you go. You know, I know nowadays, definitely, the company would do that, right? They would. I mean, if you've ever worked in retail, you know that companies will often send stuff like this to promote. But maybe maybe the store itself did this. I don't know. It's interesting to think about, but I'll have to do a little bit of research to figure out which that is. And then here's just a close-up of and you can see it's made like just like a little quilt, and it's stapled onto that piece of fabric. Oh, Scruggs Vandervoort and Barney. Okay, now is that a department store or what is that? I'm assuming you've Googled it. I love you guys. You're willing to jump on the Google. And by the way, the Henry Ford also has the one with the green. And that kit as well. So they have the exact same kit that that Questa had. Oh, here it is. Yeah, and so here you can see their kit that they have. Wherever they got it from, it was already, somebody had already started making it. So that's kind of cool that you could see the process of how this was done. Now, let's talk about dates. So you've got 1961 on this. And if you go back, you got 1973 on this one. So 1961 was the year that this was released. Druid's got some details. Okay. Scruggs Vandervoort and Barney was a department store founded in St. Louis, Missouri in 1850, okay, by McClellan Richard Scruggs. Company started as a dry goods store, with the first store open on Northwood Avenue, later expanding. 1860, Vandervoort joined. 1870, McClellan retired. Okay, so it's a dry goods store that became a department store. And it was in St. Louis, and so was Questa Benberry. So I'm guessing then if she got this countertop display and the other countertop display from that store, I would guess that they did it on their own. But that's another thing to look into. See, that's the thing. When you start researching, you fall down all these rabbit holes. You know, it's like, oh my gosh, one more thing. Oh boy, what is this? In 1907, the company moved to the Syndicate at 10th and Olive. 10 years later, they acquired the Mermaid Jacquard King Jewelry Company. Several varieties of fashion shows. In the 50s, they were known as Vandervoorts, and then opened a branch store at Clayton. Company was picketed by the NAACP for having unfair hiring practice. Wow! Okay. So, okay, this is all very interesting. You could probably go off into like a whole thing about this department store, you know? Those are the kind of rabbit holes you fall down when you start to do this research. So 1961 was when this was released. And, yuck, I forgot to write down. I want to say it was like Good Housekeeping or something. And the way they would release these things is they would put it out in a magazine to get people interested in it. And then at the bottom it would say like, I guess it might say that you could order it, but for the most part, I think that those ads would say like, get it at Lee Ward or get it at, you know, this department store. So, okay, what else did you put in here? Vandervoort suffered financial pressures and shuttered operations in 1969. All right, interesting. Crestwood Plaza branch would be taken over by Famous Bar the same year. Okay. Well, that's interesting. Shuttered operations in 1969. Okay. Well. So 61, this comes out. Now, I'm looking at these fabrics and I'm going 100-year prints or reproductions, and I'm thinking Cranston. And then I see in these creator notes, now this is not on the Henry Ford's info from the 70s. Info's not in there. But when I look at their stuff from the 60s, and I don't know that I put a picture of the quilt in here. No, I didn't put a picture of the quilt in here. Ah! Sorry. This is what happens when you click things. All right. Okay. So I noticed this Eli and Walker. And I'm like, well, who the heck is Eli and Walker? I thought it sounded familiar, right? Like the name sounds familiar. Well, I start to research. Today, when you search Eli Walker, you get like Western wear. And I'm like, well, this seems weird. And so then I start searching Eli Walker fabric. And I get some stuff that's like, there were some polyester type things of Eli Walker fabric swatches on eBay. There was some other stuff. So keep looking. And then I come across this website. And this unfortunately snagged a screenshot of it. And I don't like to show other people's content without their permission. So let me put the link in here. And I'll share it with you if you want to go there and take a look at it. Oh, thanks, Druid. So, this person did a very cool, like, I guess this person has these sample books, or they were able to take pictures of them. And these are worth so much money. I went searching and I found one of these, and it's like, Robin, you're so funny. Eagle eyes while you're loading the dishwasher. I found one of these for sale, and I think it's on eBay. It's like $995. And these particular books are Eli Walker from like the 30s or 40s. And what I just wanted to show you, and this irritates me because I didn't want to show this woman's, like, her whole website without permission, but I also wanted you guys to see. Let's see if I can open this image in a larger. Okay. This is just one of the other images that she has. I can't zoom in on this too tightly, but do you see what we're looking at here? We're seeing some yellows that look a lot like this yellow here. It's not this exact fabric is not in what I'm showing you right now, but these are very, very similar. So what I think I've discovered, and Kate, if you're listening, I think some of the fabrics that I have thought were Cranston reproductions or Cranston 100-year, if we're going to call them that, are not actually what they're actually Eli Walker. And no big deal. You know, it's a different company. So real quick before I move on to that, let me go back and I'm going to show you some stuff I've got on my desk right now. So first of all, it's beautiful when the company puts their information on the selvage. So this is a Cranston VIP, and I know this because it's on the selvage, and I'm 99% sure this is a reproduction. Might be a 100-year print. So it's one or the other. This is not something that was newly created. This is something that has been around. And gosh, it feels nice. It feels like nice new quilting cotton. So yay for Cranston. Now look at these. Reproductions? I don't know. Are they reproductions? Are they just, I'm not sure. And these are, because they're cut pieces, I don't have a selvage, so I don't know where these are from. So up close, you can see this one. Now take a gander. Oops, here's the yellow version of it. Now take a gander at this. These are some cut pieces. They're actually from, actually were a Sunbonnet Sue pieces that somebody had never put together. Now, you're thinking to yourself, oh, same thing. Almost. Not quite. So these red and yellow pieces have, let me make sure I can point it out, have this little yellow, in this case it's yellow, on the yellow it's red, this little thing. It's almost like a heart with a little sprig at the top. Or like a little turnip. In fact, I think on the yellow fabric it looks more like a turnip than anything. You see it? It looks like a little turnip. Whereas on the red they look like more like hearts. Hearts with sprigs. So, isn't that interesting? These fabrics are so very similar, yet they're not. So this fabric is kind of scratchier. It's like maybe a less nice fabric. This fabric is very soft, very much like a contemporary quilt cotton of today. This is probably something, if you are a lady of a certain age like myself, you're very familiar with this. It came in blue, it came in red, it came in yellow, it came in green. I think it also came in like a turquoisey color. This is the ubiquitous from the 70s and early 80s prints. And I think they're Cranston, but now I'm wondering. Now these two are definitely either 100-year prints or reproductions. And there's no information on the selvage. Oh, no, wait a minute. I'm wrong about that. This one's a Cranston. This one's a Cranston. This one is the one that doesn't have anything on the selvage. And I'm thinking now, this is not Cranston, it's Eli Walker. This is the same thing as this yellow and the same thing as the green that should be on there. This is just like a turquoisey version of it, whereas the green that should be on there is probably a little bit darker than this green. It's more of like an evergreen. So, you guys, I keep thinking like I'm getting somewhere with dating fabrics, and dang it if I think I'm not getting somewhere dating fabrics, because I keep making mistakes. And then I look at this kind of stuff and I go, huh? And without selvage information, like I said, this one, Cranston seems to have been pretty good for the most part about their selvages. And maybe this isn't for all time. Maybe this is at a point that, they started putting stuff on their selvage. I don't know. So let's get to more of the story, because I'm not done yet, you guys. All right. So this is the beautiful quilt from the Philadelphia Museum of Art. And like I said, you can see just a few little differences. I think that, let's see, no, those are the same. I think really the primary difference is the addition of this heart and this device at the top now, is now at the top, whereas it's at the bottom in the original. Also, I just realized the original has these dots, these circles all the way around, and this one does not. The original also has initials at the very top. Okay, yeah, does searching on images ever yield anything? Yes, it does. And in fact, that was the very first thing I did when I unpacked the quilt the other day. I did it on a stream, so as soon as the stream was over, I laid it out. Actually, it was I clipped it here and took a picture of the center and did Google Lens. And yeah, that's where I started my search, and that is very, very helpful. Now, the challenge with fabrics is you'll get stuff that's like the same color, or you'll get stuff that like, oh, there it is, but no information, or oh, there it is, and that is absolutely wrong information. So doing those kind of image searches are kind of a crapshoot, but I actually do often start with that if descriptive Googling isn't cutting it. Now, the thing about doing this search over this weekend, you know, this image that I'm showing you here, never going to show up on a Google search. I had to do the collection search through the Philadelphia Museum of Art. And some of the other ones, just they don't show up on the Google search. But as soon as you start like poking in and poking around and you've got like, okay, I've got more keywords to search, then they start coming out. So here's the part you guys are going to love. So this book, America's Quilts and Coverlets. Now here's a side note about this book. I thought I had it and I didn't. I searched and searched and searched and I'm like, I think I've mixed this book up with a different book that has, it's not the same quilt on it, but it's a very similar like looking book. And so I think that's why I always thought I had this book and I didn't. So Jill had a copy of it. So she sent me the pictures that I wanted, which is pretty much just this. And then I was like, all right, I went on Abe real quick and ordered it just so I'll have it. And, you know, it's like a $7 book. It was not expensive and I had to pay shipping. You guys, I swear I ordered this Thursday night. It was here today. Now, if that ain't something, you know, media mail usually tells you, well, it could be anywhere from 5 to 20 days. Or it could be like less than a business day. I still don't understand how this company got me this book so fast. It was almost like they read my mind and shipped it before I realized I needed it. I don't know. But here's what's interesting. You're thinking to yourself, oh, the quilt made it into a book. Well, the thing about this book is these are all antique quilts and coverlets. And this is Carlton Stafford and Robert Bishop, both big-time quilt people of late 20th century. Bob Bishop has a bunch of books. I think this might be the only one with Carlton Stafford that he did. So then you're thinking to yourself, well, Stephanie, why does an antique book, a book about antique quilts and coverlets, have a quilt that was released in 1961 in it? Well, friends, what happened was Stafford and Bishop were fooled. And quite likely, one of my dear gurus told me that what quite likely happened was it was not just Stafford and Bishop that were fooled, it was a quilt dealer that was like, oh yeah, because, and Jill sent me a little picture of the description. What they have called this is applique quilt circa 1860, Pennsylvania, 94.5 by 79.5, Mr. and Mrs. John Gordon. Now, the frontispiece of the book, which is what you see here, is the only place that it appears in the book. They don't have it they don't have it shown anywhere else, and they don't have it, there's no other description of it. And this is pretty much just like a big picture book. There's not a whole lot of exposition in here. There's, a few sections where, they have some kind of longer descriptions, but this is not like a book of essays or anything. So it's interesting to me that it's just there in the frontispiece and it's not anywhere else in the book. But sometimes that's what happens with, editors decide to do that, or the author wanted it that way or whatever. So this is known out there with the quilt, in the quilt history community. I'm just curious to know, like, at the time, how much of a kerfuffle was this? Because I think this book was originally, like, I have a reprint because this is a soft cover. I think this was originally printed in 1980. see. Where is it? Well, for some reason, they don't have the book. Oh, rights reserved. There's no date here. That's crazy. This is definitely a reprint because it's paperback. The original was a hardcover. So, but I think 1980 is right. But wow. And I kind of go back to, like, I always feel bad when I misunderstand something, or I look at stuff and I go, oh, that's blah, 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 and it's not. So it kind of makes me feel a little better about myself that, some preeminent quilt people were fooled by this quilt. And what was really interesting and kind of where I came about this data was from that first link I shared with you. And I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this. I just want to quote one thing that she said. No, I'm not going to find it again. Did I close it? I probably closed it. Dang it. Oh, poo. I think I closed it. Well, anyway, the gist of it was she quoted Cuesta. Oh, that's awesome, Kate. She basically not quoted, but she kind of paraphrased what Cuesta Benberry had said to another person, was that this kit would be the epitome of kits because it had this reproduction fabrics, it had this turkey red fabric, or turkey red colored fabric, and it fooled Safford and Bishop. So, like, Cuesta knew what this was. And I want to say, based on kind of what I put together, Cuesta's the one that said, or she was the one who was knowledgeable about quilt kits. And I don't know if she's the one who said, hey, Bob Bishop, you're wrong. Or if Cuesta was like, hey, y'all, look at this. I don't know if she was the one that pointed it out, but she was a person that recognized right away what this was. And, again, what was told to me was, not even that long ago. I mean, we're talking like the 70s and 80s. Dealers that are dealing in these really high dollar old quilts simply were not knowledgeable about kit quilts. Just like you think today, quilt historians, they're looking at, say, chintz quilts. Some quilt historians are, just, crazy about chintz quilts, and they spend so much time but they're not going to know anything about, like, I don't know. I mean, maybe they'll know about chintz reproductions that are out on the market today. If Moda or Riley Blake or somebody were to release some kind of like chintz reproductions, I could see a person who studies chintz quilts going like, oh, making note of that and paying attention to it. But if you're not a quilter and you're not somebody who spends time with quilting stuff, you are not going to have any idea what's happening in contemporary quilting if you don't go look for it. Like if you don't pay attention to this, you're not going to know what you don't know if you're really focused narrowly on like historical quilts and you're not a quilter. So I feel like that's probably a lot of what was going on there. And I mean, probably again, still today, people that are not quilters, there just may be a gap in their knowledge as to what could be going on in this, commercial hobby oriented place. And I mean, and quilt kits, I mean, even today still kind of get a bad rap, I guess. They, I likened it to paint by number. And I think that's kind of the way a lot of people look at them, is like, well, it's like it's stamped on there. Or in the case of some stuff today, it's already pre-cut. It's already cut into strips, or it's already like laser cut into applique shapes, that kind of thing. So, these kind of quilts get a bad rap, but I don't see it that way. I think they're very interesting. I love the fact that this is based on an old quilt. And I would love to know who patterned it and who was responsible for it coming out in 1961. Because, as we know, like, Florence Pito, she did a whole bunch of work. She owned this Baltimore Beauty quilt, this Baltimore album quilt, or was a sampler. And she, I guess, I guess she drafted it. all of her work, basically all of her work, went over to Paragon. She, I want to say licensed it, but I don't really think that's what happened. Like, they paid her money to take what she had done and put it out into this kit. It wasn't like she made royalties off the kit. She just had an agreement with them where they paid her and then they put it into this kit. So that also was one that was, I mean, it's you know, it's out there. It's pretty easy to find. I have the kit. I think Jill actually, she may not have it anymore, but in her inventory she had the made up quilt. And because it is so intricate as far as the Baltimore album aspect of it, it's a cross stitch quilt where you do the cross stitch on it instead of actually appliquing the way you would with this. But if you buy one of those kits, there is nothing on it anywhere that references Florence Pito. And likewise, I'm finding nothing that references whoever might have done this. So, frustrating. Kind of sad because, you know, somebody was responsible for this. Paragon didn't go to the Philadelphia Museum and draft this. Somebody did it for them. And that person, you know, is maybe lost to time if there isn't some place where that is documented. I would love to find out, and I will keep searching. Now, we're not done yet because we have this. You guys want to know about Elsie? I got to be honest. Elsie's story is sad. I'm not 100% sure I have found the correct Elsie. I'm about 95% sure I found the correct Elsie. And here's the search I did. And I don't really have anything to show other than her signature here. So I'll just go back to me. So, when I want to look for a person, I go into Ancestry. And I have just a standard Ancestry account, and I have newspapers.com too, as like they do a bundle. And you know, it's a monthly expense, and I think I pay it like quarterly or every 6 months or something, but it's an expense, but for the amount of research that I do, it's absolutely worth it. But I do know if you're interested in doing that kind of research, most libraries will have an Ancestry account, like a library account that you can, and newspapers.com too, so you can go do research at your library for free if you're interested in doing that. I always like to let people know that, because I think sometimes, you know, the idea of trying to get an Ancestry account is just, and sort of bridging the gap of learning how to navigate it, you know, that can be off-putting for people. So, you know, I go to the library. So I go into Ancestry, and I took a shot that, so first of all, roll it back. I double checked with Dana Balsamo, Dana Auctions, that this is truly from Bobby Ogg's collection, because the auction this came from, she advertised it as quilts from Bobby Ogg's collection, but also she has quilts that come in as part of her inventory that, you know, then when she does a quilt and textile auction, she'll also put those in. So, you know, she has the Bobby Ogg collection, and then she has these other quilts that go in there. So I confirmed with her that it was truly from the Bobby Ogg collection. And the reason why, and I will tell you, auctioneers sometimes and dealers, they kind of they don't like to reveal a lot, because it's almost like it's a customer vendor confidentiality thing. And they, you know, they'll let you know a little bit maybe, but they often don't want to reveal like a whole lot. Particularly because sometimes the people that they're auctioning for won't let them reveal a lot. But I figured she would probably at least confirm for me is this was Bobby Ogg's, and it is, definitely. But the reason I really wanted to know is because it would hopefully help me figure out Elsie. So Bobby Ogg was from Colorado. Well, lo and behold, I found an Elsie Worden, also in Colorado. So that's kind of case in point one that tells me this might be the right Elsie. I looked at her birth and death dates, 1908, and she passed away in 1994. So with the time periods we've got going on, The original version of this was 1961. This current version of it is 1973. Do I have a video playing in the background? No, I have. My son is on the phone in the next room. So I don't know what he's talking to about what, but he's probably got it on speaker. So with this being 73, that's within Elsie's lifespan. So I start looking, and at least I know my microphone is picking up some stuff. So when you look at a whole bunch of people that show up in Ancestry, you're going to get stuff like Elsie Whedon instead of Elsie Worden, or Elsie Worden with an O instead of with an E, Elsie Warden. You've got Elsie L, Elsie M, you know, you've got all this stuff, and you have to figure out who's what. I settled on Elsie Lutz Worden. Lutz is her maiden name, for a couple reasons. One, again, because the dates work, because she's from Colorado, and so is Bobby, and because some of these other Elsies were, like, one had a passenger list because she had gone to, like, Cristobal, Peru in 1930 something, and I was like, well, our Elsie, this one I'm looking at in Colorado, like, she very well could have gone there. But when I opened up, like, the passenger manifest list for that person's trip to Peru and back, I kind of think it was not the name Elsie Worden, which was what was transcribed, but actually Elsie something else. It was like Elsie, like WEADON or something like that. I don't think it was our Elsie. So you have to, like, kind of pick through and look at those kind of things. So I decided that the Elsie Lutz Worden that I'm seeing is probably the right one. Now here's another interesting thing. This quilt, because it's based on a quilt in the Philadelphia Museum of Art, other versions of it that I have found out there, in fact, one is on the Quilt Index for person, and the name of this, I can't remember if I mentioned, is American Glory, is what the quilt of the pattern is named. Somebody had made an American Glory, and they were from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. So that whole Berks County, Bucks County, the Amish, the Mennonites, the Pennsylvania Dutch. This, and I realize that you're not seeing a whole lot of it because it's too close to the camera, but got this heart. You've got these very Pennsylvania Dutchy kind of elements. So it's for sure patriotic, but it's also kind of got these, like, folk arty kind of elements that line up with Pennsylvania Dutch stuff. So I'm thinking, oh, well, yeah, people in Lancaster would probably have loved this. And indeed, I have found at least one, but possibly two other people that were from Pennsylvania that made this. And again, it makes sense. Like, they probably found out about this kit. They, you know, knew it was at the Philadelphia Museum. You know, they did all of their research just like I've done. And they, you know, were like, great, I can make this quilt and da-da-da, all that. So why would Elsie, living in Colorado, make this quilt? Well, maybe she just likes eagles, like I do. Maybe she just thought it was really cool looking, like I do. But wait, Elsie, and I need to find it because I want to make sure I read this right. Put that there. So Elsie, so this is something in her profile on Ancestry that I found. This is from the American Historical Society of Germans from Russia obituaries. And I will read this. Elsie Worden, Englewood homemaker, 88. Elsie Worden of Englewood, a homemaker, died October 12th. She was 86. A funeral service was October 14th at Aurora Chase Chapel. Interment was at the Elmwood Cemetery. She was born Elsie Lutz on August 1st, 1908 in Brighton. Her husband Thomas is deceased. Mrs. Worden was a member of the Hope Lutheran Church. She is survived by a sister, Mary L. Musborn, Brighton, and three brothers, William Lutz, Englewood, John Lutz, Golden, and George Lutz, Wellington. So all Colorado. So I'm like, Germans from Russia. That's weird. I've never heard of that, but okay, whatever. So then I just, again, you really want to find, like, you want to keep backing up and looking at as much data on a person as you can find. Because what you're looking for, so like in genealogy, if you've never done any genealogical research, there's something called the genealogical proof standard. And for you to be certain that you are on the right trail, you have to have reasonably certain sources of information that all coincide, like they all make the same amount of sense. Nothing in there that you're looking at is going like, these are the wrong dates, or this is the wrong town or state or whatever. You're always looking for those things. So you have a hypothesis. Is Elsie Lutz Worden my Elsie? My hypothesis is that she is. So now I'm looking for reasons that she is not. And so that's the genealogical proof standard. And so I started looking at the censuses. All the censuses come up for her: 1920, 1930, 1940, and 1950, which is awesome. When you have like 4 straight censuses of somebody. Oh, no, actually, I take that back. I think 1930 is the one I couldn't readily find. And I was going to have to go back and like force the 1930 one to come up. It might be because sometimes the transcriptions, in some cases, they're now using AI, like the 1950 census. I think AI has done a lot of that transcription. Whereas the older censuses that show up, in Ancestry, Family Tree, which is our family search, Family Tree, the one that is, there's a free version that is the Church of Latter-day Saints manages. And a lot of the same information, like census data, is there too. There's human beings that did those transcriptions, or some machine learning, and it's a big combination. It's a big mix, and sometimes it's wrong. And so I'm thinking that's what's going on with the 1930s, and I got to do a little bit harder research. But she got married in the 30s. She was born in 1908. She got married in the early 30s. It might have even been 1930 that she got married to a man named Thomas Francis Worden. Now, some of the other data that comes up for her is like Social Security Index, the Death Index, local directories. So like the phone book. But in this case, they're city directories, which are ginormous. And so paging through those, I find one in like 1969, I think, that had her listed living by herself, and listed as widowed. And so I'm like, and so that's what her obituary said. Her husband was deceased. She didn't appear to ever have children. And the 1940 and 1950 census lists Thomas as like a repairman, a radio repairman. And the 1950 census lists that they have a repair shop and that she works in the repair shop, which was cool. Like, this couple, have this, business. This is very cool to find out about them. So I'm putting all that together, and then I'm like, all right, let me look at, and let me roll back a minute to explain the Germans in Russia. So she's Lutheran. I'm looking at these censuses of her parents, and they're from Russia. But her father's name is Lutz, L-U-T-Z. Her mother's maiden name is Ernst, E-R-N-S-T. Now, I don't know about you, those do not sound like Russian names to me. Those sound like German names. Well, I had to consult Mr. Google, and here is what I found out about that. Crud. I'm on the wrong screen. So what I have figured out, and so in the censuses, like, her parents from Russia, on one census it says that her mother speaks Russian, but on all the other censuses I found for her mother, and her mother's name was Elizabeth, she speaks German. So I'm like, what is this Russia-German thing? Okay, so Tsarina Catherine II, who we're talking 1700s, she was German. And I mean, as you guys know, back in the day, Europe was all these different conglomerates of empires. So you have the Prussian Empire, and you have the Ottoman Empire, and you've got, all of these people fighting for, hold on all of these sections. So you've got the Vistula Germans who landed in Poland. And then you have the Volga Germans who landed in Russia. And it was because of Catherine II. She was German. And after she gained power, she proclaimed open immigration for foreigners wishing to live in the Russian Empire on the 22nd of July, 1763. And so this is this huge wave of German migration to the Russian Empire versus the Prussian Empire, which was like the Polish stuff. And I think the Prussian Empire, we're talking about a different time frame, I think. But let's look at some of this stuff that Wikipedia tells us. German immigration was motivated in part by religious intolerance and warfare in Central Europe, as well as by frequently difficult economic conditions, particularly among the southern principalities. Catherine II's declaration freed German immigrants from requirements for military service, which was imposed on native Russians, and from most taxes. It placed the new arrivals outside of Russia's feudal hierarchy and granted them considerable internal autonomy. Moving to Russia gave German immigrants political rights that they would not have possessed in their own lands. Religious minorities found these terms very agreeable, particularly Mennonites from the Vistula River Valley. Their unwillingness to participate in military service and their long tradition of dissent from mainstream Lutheranism and Calvinism made life under the Prussians very difficult. Nearly all Prussian Mennonites emigrated to Russia over the following century, leaving no more than a handful in Prussia. So, Elsie Lutz's parents, Elizabeth Ernst, and I think her dad's name was Fred Lutz, had to have been Volga Germans. They had to have come, now not them necessarily themselves, but maybe their parents, maybe their grandparents. They had to have been part of this. It would not make sense in any other way for somebody to have been a native German and speaking German, but living in Russia and calling Russia, not to say there's no way in any other way, but this is a situation where, right, like, it lines up is what I'm trying to say. It lines up, and that's got to be the answer, right? Until I find out otherwise, Now, were Fred and Elizabeth, were they Mennonites? I don't know. It's possible. I don't know how they ended up in Colorado. I didn't get that far. They definitely were in Colorado. Elsie was born in Colorado, lived her whole life in Colorado. So yeah, thanks, Druid. Yeah, it sounds plausible. I mean, these are the things that until you find, no, this cannot be true. That's how you work a hypothesis. That's how you work your research. Now, if you only find one source that tells you, yeah, it's true, 2 thumbs up, I found the answer, that's problematic, particularly for the genealogical proof standard. But when you keep finding all of these things that, again, like, sort of underscore your theories. Now, Elsie was Lutheran. So, I don't know, but the idea that her parents could very well have been in proximity to Prussian Mennonites, even if they were Lutheran. I mean, you just think about family stories and you think about family history and the things that are around a household and the things that people are interested in, like something that's kind of Pennsylvania Dutchy. Doesn't that kind of sound like something that a person with German ancestry who maybe has some connection to Mennonites and is definitely Lutheran? I mean, all of that kind of leads together to me to think, like, now, and again, maybe she just liked this and thought it was cool, but also maybe she's thinking to herself, Yeah, I'm from Colorado, but I really love the idea of exploring, you know, my parents' roots, and some of our relatives are Mennonites in Pennsylvania. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe. So there's all these little things, and you think like you can concoct this story that has some plausibility. And so again, I keep looking to find something that throws a monkey wrench in and says, Stephanie, you're wrong. Now, here's the rest of the story. This is the part that makes me sad. So I keep looking, and I mean, I still have more looking to do, because first of all, I was like, well, they never had children. And this is interesting because, you know, maybe they couldn't have children. Maybe they didn't want children. Who knows? You never can guess without hearing it from the horse's mouth. But at a time when people had children, you know, it was very few and far between, where you find somebody who was a homemaker and her husband had a traditional job and they just didn't have children. You know, not to say they didn't exist. Certainly they did. Elsie's an example. But my gosh, you know, that generation certainly more often had children. And, you know, somebody that was getting married in the 30s, you know, I mean, maybe the Depression put them off for a little bit, you know, in terms of like starting a family, but you would think, well, and then, I mean, 30s go right into World War II. And I mean, maybe there just was never the right time to have kids because what the world was, you know, what the country was going through. I don't know. So that kind of made me sad. Like, she never had kids. She didn't have anybody. And of course, her husband predeceased her. So knowing that by 69, she's listed as a widow, but 1950, they were running a repair shop. So I'm like, well, let me find out when Thomas died. Thomas died in 1965. Thomas got married to a woman named Frances Dobbs in 1964. And you may be asking, wait a minute, you surely found the wrong Thomas Worden, right? If he married a woman named Frances Dobbs in 1964, how does this make sense? He had children. Well, the children were Frances Dobbs' children, at least one of them. Other children were foster children. They were listed in his obituary. Now, why am I certain that he's the right one? Well, the dates line up. His birth date, when he's married to Elsie, is on multiple census reports. It is on his draft card. I have, when I'm a positive birth date. Also have his birthplace. It's kind of it was an oddball, oh gosh, it kind of sounded like a, might have been like a Native American name, or, you know, it was something like not your standard names of Colorado. He was from Colorado. It sounded like it could have been like a Native American name. That's on his draft card, and it is on his on his obituary. So this is the right guy. As best I can figure out, sometime in the mid to late 50s, Mr. Thomas Worden, split on Elsie. Now, I don't know if, I'm assuming they got divorced. Divorce was kind of not a cool thing back then. You know, nice ladies didn't get divorced. The fact that she didn't have children, you know, I mean, it kind of makes the whole situation very complicated. So by 1965, indeed, Elsie's husband was dead. But he wasn't Elsie's husband anymore. He was Frances Dobbs' husband. So, you know, the question, I mean, we'll probably never know what happened unless I end up stumbling across somebody that knew Mrs. Elsie Worden. But sadly, I think Elsie, you know, she did not get remarried, but her husband did. And I think that she probably just, you know, she just said, my husband's dead, instead of being embarrassed and having to say my husband left me. And, you know, it seems like she probably just, you know, for those last few decades kind of lived her life out, like, quietly. Made some quilts. And really was a very, very beautiful quilter. Her work is very, very good. Her stitches are tiny. They're very even. Just, you know, her quilting is just perfection. You know, I mean, we're not I'm not going to say it's 12 stitches to the inch or anything, but I mean, it's a very nice, very, very good quality work. So yeah, that's the story of Elsie. In my spare time, I have a whole bunch of topics that I pick at, and I think Elsie's going to be one I just kind of pick at and see if I can find something on her. I tried the newspaper, the newspapers in Colorado, thinking like, maybe she got, maybe she entered a quilt into something and like won a prize or, a fair, or maybe she was recognized in some way, and I couldn't find anything. And not all of us live our lives showing up in the newspaper at some point. But yeah, I'm kind of bummed about this, because I'd hoped maybe to find a person who, certainly it'd be great to find somebody who was still alive. But if not, maybe some children or relatives or something. My guess is either Bobby Ogg knew her in some way, perhaps Quilting Guild or a shop or something in the area. Or maybe when she passed away, her stuff went to auction and Bobby purchased this. So, we've lost a Bobby too. Bobby passed away this year. So, without having any access to her records, I really don't know. I can't say much more about it. So that, you guys, is the story that, as I know it to this point, about this quilt, about the original, about the earlier version, about tricking Safford and Bishop. And yeah, I got all that research done in 3 days. Pretty cool. Also, I will leave you with this, because I did pretty good today. In that Safford and Bishop book that came, I swear, they shipped it before I knew I needed it. I think I've mentioned before, I love buying used books because sometimes they have treasures inside of them. They'll have a note, or they'll have something bookmarked, or, they might have just something somebody just used as a bookmark. Well, this one had a little pattern, project stuck in the back of it. It's just this little trifold thing. And this, it's a Suzanne McNeil Design Originals. And it's called Potpourri Pies. Oh, you guys. Okay. So this is very clever. It's cute, but I look at this and I'm going, oh God, this is that crap that people make. And I mean, you're using a pie plate and a glue gun, and you fill this thing with potpourri, and then you appear to be covering it with tulle, a white tulle, to keep the potpourri in, and then you use fabric strips and weave it like the top of a pie, and then you're putting a fake ruffle, a fake pie crust ruffle. And you glue it all down, and then you're putting some, it's a very cute idea, but I'm just like, oh God, this is that shit that people make to give away or sell at a church bazaar or craft show, and people buy it, and it sits around and collects dust. And collects more dust, and you're like, this was cute, but it has worn out its welcome. That's what these projects are like to me. It is very clever. It's really kind of cute. But yeah, I was like, oh God, this is the kind of these country crafts. 1992 is the date on this. Oh, and they have a tea dye recipe too. Here's the tea dye. For a time-worn look, dip muslin fabric in a strong, all capital letters, solution of tea water. Squeeze out excess liquid, wrinkle fabric in a little heap, then let the fabric dry overnight. This will give a mottled tan color to the muslin fabric. Also, do you know what it'll do? It will make your fabric be eaten through by the tea tannins eventually. Yeah, so tea dyeing fabric is probably not something you want to do with your heirloom quilts, but certainly for some crud like this, you could tea dye. Yes, these pies definitely need to go with the fruits and vegetables from Margaret Eccles' book. Speaking of, when I was looking to see if I had the Safford and Bishop book, when I was scrolling through my bookshelf here, pulling some stuff out, I found the Margaret Eccles book, and I have the patterns tucked in there from when I made the turnip. Where are you, turnip? So the original Turnip of Hope has another home, but this is the tiny turnip. We'll have to revisit Margaret Eccles this fall. So anyway, I leave you with that. Should you be interested, yes, country charm. Should you be interested in making a potpourri pie, hit me up. You know where to find me. I will send you a photocopy, a scan. I'll drop this in the mail. You let me know. So, with that, you guys, I'm going to let you go for the day. Happy Monday. I hope that you have a fantastic week. Hope that you guys can join me and Jill tomorrow. My heart. Dusty potpourri that smells like apples. Yeah. Or dusty potpourri that just smells like the idea of potpourri and dust. But yeah, I hope you can join me and Jill tomorrow night as we start Patchwork Pillowcases, Pennsylvania Patchwork Pillowcases, or Wednesday for Needlework Nights. Otherwise, I'll be back on Thursday like usual. And yeah, I'm cooking up some stuff for Thursday. So have a wonderful afternoon / evening. Have a wonderful week. And thank you as always. I couldn't do this without you. And I will see you soon. So, mwah, mwah, mwah. Bye, guys.